one thing turns into another, right? So we were just talking right now, and we noticed that this walk-in freezer compressor hasn't ran. So we went downstairs, and the box is at 25 degrees. And then, as we're talking, this one goes off on high pressure bypass, where the internal pressure relief started bleeding the pressure from one side to the other. We have an extremely hot discharge line. And this guy just restarted. I have a feeling it's going off on high pressure. And then we open this up because this condenser fan motor is not running, and there's actually an electrical short in there.
This video is brought to you by Sporlan, quality, integrity, and tradition.
Well, this morning we have a call that a walk-in cooler is not working, and I don't know if you guys can hear that, but to me it sounds like it's low on gas. You can hear the expansion valves feeding the way they are. We don't see any ice. No ice on the coils. And the thermostat says 51 degrees. So that thermostat controls a solenoid valve that tells the system to turn on. So judging by the sound that I'm hearing, we're low on refrigerant. So we're going to get up onto the roof and see what's going on up there. I'm making an assumption that it's low on gas, so I came out to my van to grab a drum of refrigerant before I go into the roof. But before I do that, I typically don't take my scale on the roof. I'll just weigh it down here. So we're gonna write 21 pounds. You can see I do that all the time. So we'll write 21 pounds on here, and then when we're all done, we'll subtract the difference and find out how much gas we used. All right, done a lot of work on racks like this one and this one in particular. Come up, this is our walk-in cooler compressor. Looks like someone left a thing up here. What the heck? And the sight glass looks to be full, but it's actually more than likely completely empty. So we need to put some service gauges on this guy. Once we put gauges on it, it'll kind of let us know what's going on within the system. Before you put on service gauges, you always want to investigate the system. So first and foremost, I see some oil right here. It looks like it might be dried though. But when we track around to this side, I definitely see something going on here. We've got a big oil stain. That's fresh oil all over this valve. And this is a newer receiver. So there's no reason there should be oil coming from that, unless something's not tight or, you know, who knows. But we always want to pay attention to that, because sometimes you can correct refrigerant leaks by just applying your service gauges. So you always want to be vigilant. We're quickly doing this before we take all the caps off, but I saw some oil on this too. So I sprayed it with some Big Blue. I have a feeling it's just very, very small leaks, and I have a feeling these are not the source of the potential low refrigerant charge. I think that they're adding to it, but I bet you anything we're gonna find leaks in the evaporator coils. But this one right here, I wanna show you something. I haven't done anything to it yet, and look at this, boom. This guy's loose. So this guy is not even tight, which is definitely gonna cause a problem. That needs to be tight, and you can see it leaking right there. I'll put some Big Blue on there. See, when I took it off, I could see a bubble. Yeah, we're getting little micro bubbles. It's hard because it's vibrating, but we're getting little micro bubbles right in here. So this packing's definitely going bad on this one. So we definitely need to look into that. But at this point, I put some on the other one too, and I'm not seeing anything major. So we're gonna go ahead and apply the service gauges and finish our diagnosis. All right, so when we're applying service gauges, I know I'm using this wrench backwards, but there's no way to do it. Plus, we're not having to torque very hard. But you always want to loosen your packing just a little bit, okay? Before you actuate this stem, because you can wear out the packing gland in there. So just ever so slightly loosen it, then you can actuate the adjustment stems. Okay, as we're applying service gauges, when you actuate these valves, all right, we want to, I guess you can say mid-seat, but really we're just gonna crack this valve. Just gonna push the plunger, this guy right here, the stem, down in there about 1 1/4 turns, okay? And that's gonna open the process port, or the port coming out of it, so that way our service gauges can read pressure, Okay, that's about it. You don't need to go any further than that. If you go too far, you're actually gonna shut off the flow of refrigerant through that valve, okay? All right, so this is a 404A system. It's currently about 65 degrees outside. So you can see my liquid saturation temperature, which is the condensing temperature, the temperature of the refrigerant in the middle of the condenser inside of it, is at 62 degrees when it's like 65 degrees outside. You should have approximately, on this type of a system, 25 to 30 degree temperature difference between outdoor ambient temperature and the saturation temperature. So we're clearly low on refrigerant. Now, remember I showed you the sight glass? It looks crystal clear because it's completely empty of refrigerant. Okay, that sight glass doesn't have a solid column of liquid refrigerant, and that's why we heard that sound downstairs. So we need to add refrigerant to this system, but we also need to find a refrigerant leak too. We're gonna go ahead and shut the system down and do a quick leak check, see if we see anything obvious jumping out at us. And then we'll add refrigerant as necessary. All right, we shut down the system, and what's actually happening is the system's equalizing out because the liquid line solenoid valve is still open downstairs, but we're gonna speed that process up. We're gonna purge real quick just to make sure we got any air out of the lines, and then we're gonna go ahead and open up high side into low side so we can equalize out the pressures. So we have, you know, high suction, high discharge, and helping us with a leak search. So everything else is off, and we're gonna go ahead and get the leak detector out. We're gonna pull the covers for the condenser, do a quick leak search. Now, if there's a leak downstairs in the evaporator section, we can fix that by pumping the system down. If there's a leak upstairs on the high side, anywhere between the compressor discharge and the outlet of that receiver, we have to recover the entire charge to fix that leak. So we're gonna look for it first real quick on the high side just to make sure it's not a major leak on the high side, and everything else can be repaired after the fact. We can go ahead and top off the charge, you know, and get them operational if need be, if it's downstairs. Doing a quick leak search. I'm not really seeing anything jumping out at me on the condenser. You would think we would see some oil signs and stuff. I don't really see anything. Let's, yeah, it's very minimal what's on here. We also found that these guys were loose, which would definitely cause an intermittent leak, but I don't see anything else. Always check your pressure reliefs on your vessels, receivers. Okay, nothing there. So nothing's jumping out at me. Do a quick pass under this condenser. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time just to make sure. Now I have my leak detector on turbo, so it'll typically pick up quite a bit. Check around your flare joints. You would see if it was leaking around the flare joint because you would see oil all around it typically. But always check them just to be safe. I'm checking the bottom of the condenser. It's not common to have leaks on these condensers. Typically they're in the evaporator coils. This evaporator coil I can tell you is from I think 2003, so it's an old system, 05 actually. I just walked by it, so always check your pressure control high side. Nothing. Definitely picking up something up in that packing gland. But we also have the packing open, so that's always something to remember. So on the field piece, you remember, it reads right here, but then it also reads on the light on the tip, so I like that. So we definitely have something going on there, but I have the packing open, so that's not completely unheard of. All right, so there's that. Check that guy. I'm not seeing anything really on the high side. Let's check down here where we saw this oil. Nah, nothing. Okay, so at this point, our leak is probably not gonna be up here. It doesn't seem like it's in the condenser. I mean, there's minute leaks on the valves. At this point, we have to get this system operational. Now, we're gonna need to do a leak search downstairs too, but we're gonna add gas to it no matter what. So we've done leak repairs on this coil before. I think I fixed leaks right on that when I changed that receiver. And I think I did another braze joint too, maybe on the other coil. But you always want the fans off when you're leak searching, okay? So we're gonna take our leak detector, start at the bottom of the coil. They'll pop out at the bottom so the refrigerant falls. Come over here. There we go. Yeah, that lighted tip makes it really nice. We definitely got something going on right over there. We need to get some, at this point, get some soap bubbles on it. But you don't just assume that one leak is the problem. You keep tracing. Ooh. Yeah, I suspect we're gonna start having a lot of leaks on this coil because once it starts leaking, you know, the joints start leaking on everything. Really should replace it, but we'll see. All right, we got some Viper Big Blue on there. Refrigeration Technologies Big Blue, whatever you want to call it. And right down here, right down in there, we've got bubbles for sure, and I can actually hear it leaking out. So we're gonna keep going. We're actually picking up leaks on the other coil too, so we'll jump in on that one with some Big Blue and try to pinpoint them. Okay, so this side has multiple leaks too. Same thing, Viper Big Blue right up there. That micro cluster of bubbles is a leak. Looks like maybe there's one down here at the bottom too, possibly. And then there's definitely one right over here. So we've got multiple leaks. It seems to be at the same spots. We'll mark those. We're checking the other side of the evaporator coils too. These are all repairable. Customer really should consider replacing this coil, but I think we're gonna put some welds on these just for now. So on this second coil, I marked it. We have a leak right there with the Sharpie pointing down. We have a leak right at the bottom of that tube right there. Then we have a leak right at the bottom of that tube right there. And then also up there. And I marked that one too. So then we're gonna go over to the other coil and mark those ones. It's funny, it's almost leaking in the same spot. So right on this guy, down on the back side, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a micro cluster of bubbles back there. Then right down there on that distribution tube. Then actually right up here on this distribution tube too, so I marked it. So this coil has 3 leaks, the other one has 4 leaks, I think. So, what a mess. Okay, we're gonna pump this guy down, so we need to close both of these guys because they were equalized out. And then we're gonna turn on the compressor, and then we're gonna front seat suction service valves on the other side. I mean on the receiver, we're gonna front seat the king valve. All right, so that's that. We're gonna do here is turn this guy on. There you go, it's running now. And then we come over here and we need to front seat this king valve. All right, in front seating the king valve, right, what you want to do is you want to actuate the packing. So the packing's loose. All right, now when you actuate the packing, it is going to leak, guys. And notice there's a little bit of oil coming from this. That packing was already loose, actually. That's part of the reason, probably. But then verify this is on tight if you don't have a gauge hose on there, which I don't. So, and we're just going to front seat the king valve, which is drive the valve stem all the way in. And then what that's gonna do is stop the refrigerant flow coming out of that valve. So now the refrigerant will not pass past this point right here. And the compressor keeps pumping until the suction pressure gets lower and lower, then it finally shuts off. So you come over here, so the refrigerant flow has stopped coming out of the receiver, which that liquid line goes to the solenoid valve, expansion valve, and then it comes back up on the suction line. The high side in the compressor isn't going to leak through, but check this out. See how it's, I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah, it's bubbling right now because it leaks out the packing. Okay, so high side, low side. Low side right now is about to turn back on. You can actually actuate it by sticking a screwdriver right in here, get it to turn back on, but it'll turn back on here in a sec. So the compressor is not allowing gas to pass through inside of the scroll assembly, right? So and it's not turning on, so we're gonna have to go ahead and actuate it. I just stick my screwdriver into the bellows very carefully, push up, it's gonna pull down, but you don't want to pull a scroll into a vacuum. It's pumping down right now, right about there, 3 psi, and then we're gonna let it sit. Don't see anything major. It's not rising anymore, so what we need to do is actually open up the low side and vent the remaining pressure into the atmosphere. Okay, that's considered a de minimis loss because we have to have a place for the pressure that's going to build up when I braze on the system to go. So you always leave that off when you're brazing on a pump down system. All right, getting into some of these spots is pretty tight to sand it appropriately, and we want to have the best surface possible. So I have two different tools. I take a fitting brush end for a drill, break it off, for a copper fitting, put it in the drill, and then also I have the Dremel tool. We'll get in there with both, whatever fits best the situation, and try to clean up those braze joints. Never gonna be perfect, but it's better than it was. Sanded it pretty good in there. Same thing over here, pretty good in there. Down here was really difficult to get to, but we'll get in there and get them brazed up. We're working on the other side right now. Just because of the amount of leaks, we're just gonna go ahead and braze up. There's only 2 distribution tubes per side. We're gonna braze them both, even the ones that aren't leaking, because they're all just leaking over time, it seems like. So got them pretty much sanded up as best as possible. Again, this is the hardest one. We're gonna clean them up, dry them up, and then get in there with the torch and lay a couple beads on them. All right. We're just gonna heat them up and lay a bead on them using a small tip. Doing it a little different because I don't want to overheat it, so I'm just laying a bead on there, and then we'll melt it all into it, like that. The back side's going to be kind of tricky, but it's flowing. Just get a little drop on the back side. Should be able to see it. There we go. That's flowing. There's one. Again, doing the same thing, just laying a bead on there, and then we're going to let it melt into it. Just so we don't overheat it. Cause a bigger problem here. See it flex. The whole thing just dropped into there. Flex the fingers. Get some on the back side. Make sure it takes back there too. Good. Okay, now these tricky ones is these ones without burning the entire thing down. You have to get solid to flow in that way. There's one. So it looks like it might have been brazed on before. Two. Laying solder on the top, letting the heat pull it down. There's another one. We'll do the last one. Last one's kind of the hardest. Bring it heat from the other side. Okay, that's it for this side. Now it's tricky, these aren't perfect, but got a lot of solder on each one of those joints. Should be much better than it was. Also soldered these joints like crazy. Same right there. And we're gonna cool them off and jump onto the other side. So we lay a bunch of goobers on the top. It's a little different than what they teach you in school. And then we heat it up from the bottom and let it drip down. In situations where it's hard to get to, that's a good little trick to make sure that you get good solder flow. So that one's good. The bottom one's gonna be the trickiest. Kind of the same thing, just goober it on the top. Get plenty of solder on there, and then it'll flow with the heat now as we bring the heat down to the bottom. Should be good. Now the last side. Alright, so this side's good now. Some braze joints, all corners. Make sure we didn't blow any holes in the line. We'll inspect them all, and then we'll get upstairs, change the dryer, and evacuate the system. Alright, so we're going to use some mechanical advantage here. And what we're going to do is use the wrenches against themselves. Okay? So, I can do one-handed. Well, maybe not. But two hands, and that thing comes apart. Yeah, you gotta be smart about it. Try to use the wrenches in the right direction if possible. Okay, so sometimes you gotta flip them around, but majority of the time you can use them in the right direction and it'll work perfect. There we go. So nothing wrong with this sight glass, it's fairly new. Just swap out the dryer. Again, same thing, mechanical advantage. Just use the wrenches. Sometimes I'll use my Kinepix wrenches, but I find that the adjustables are a little bit easier for this. So what I'll actually do is use the ground. There we go. Pull this apart. Again, that's what I love about the Sporlan catch-all and see-all, this male-female, I dig it. You gotta make sure though that that copper bushing's in there because that's what seals it from refrigerant leaks. All right, so we're gonna take a little bit of nylog right here. Easy peasy. Just put a drop right here, not much. Good. Don't get it in. You want the dryer pointing towards the sight glass in most cases. Now it's not always going to match up. It kind of is what it is on that. I'm not too worried about that. And then we're going to use the mechanical advantage again of the wrenches. Kind of just put them together. There we go. Good quarter turn past snug. All right, so now we're good. Dryer's pointing into the sight glass. We'll make sure that the sight glass is pointing that way. We're gonna go ahead and take a drop of nylog right here, drop of nylog right here, and then the most important place for the nylog is actually right on this flare nut, right here, on the mating surface where it spins. That really, really helps. Just like that. Snug. Dryer's in, it's torqued down as tight as it should go. Now, it's always best to use a torque wrench, guys. I don't use one, I probably should, but I kind of know what's tight and what's not tight enough. I'd be kind of curious to check myself against a torque wrench, but anyways, it's all torqued in. We're ready to go get all the tools to pull the evacuation now. All right, I am gonna pull my evacuation through my gauges. It's not, you know, the best way to pull a vacuum, but in this situation, we have a pump down system, and I've said this many times, you're never gonna achieve a perfect vacuum. We're only pulling on the low side. The compressor is not 100% leak free, nor are any of those valves that are blocking off the refrigerant flow on the king valve, okay? We're not gonna see 500 microns on this guy. It's just how it is, all right? There's also an argument to be made that technically there's probably still oil boiling out of the oil right now. So, I mean refrigerant. So, you know, you're still probably displacing oxygen from entering the system, but still, we're gonna do our best to pull a vacuum. Got the gas ballast open for now. Pulling through the vacuum port. We do not want to open the high side port because that will allow refrigerant to flow into the gauge manifold. And that's the other thing too. This valve right here is not 100% leak free either. So when you've got pump down systems, you're never going to get a perfect vacuum. Even on a non-pump down system, on an old system with refrigerant in the oil, it's going to be really hard to completely dehydrate that oil. Just do your best, let the dryer do its work too once the system starts back up. So I was just explaining this evacuation process, and I want to clarify something. If we try to pull a perfect vacuum when the system is pumped down, the refrigerant is stopped at that king valve over there, and it's stopped inside the compressor, okay? But we have high side pressure on the discharge line. It's not showing because we're pulling into sub-micron levels, but we have high side pressure right here. We are ever so slightly pulling that refrigerant out of the system as we speak right now, okay? It is not 100% leak free. If we tried to pull a perfect evacuation, we could come back in 2 days, because this would take forever, but the system would be completely out of refrigerant even though it's pumped down, because eventually it will pull through the king valve, it will pull through the compressor ever so slightly, okay? So that's what I'm saying, we're never gonna get a perfect vacuum on a pump down system, okay? One thing turns into another, right? So we were just talking right now, and we noticed that this walk-in freezer compressor hasn't ran. So we went downstairs, and the box is at 25 degrees. And then, as we're talking, this one goes off on high pressure bypass, where the internal pressure relief started bleeding the pressure from one side to the other. We have an extremely hot discharge line. And this guy just restarted. I have a feeling it's going off on high pressure. And then we open this up because this condenser fan motor is not running, and there's actually an electrical short in there. It's not running at the moment, but right here, boom, there's an electrical short. So we have a multiple issue here. We got some problems. So we're gonna shut off this rack the rest of the way and look into that condenser fan motor right now. All right, so we turned off power, and we get in here, and it looks like that wire shorted. And it looks like it just shorted inside. Yeah, just that one. So I bet you anything we're gonna have a blown fuse. And this nut had come off too, so we'll definitely connect that back. I have a feeling we're just gonna have a blown fuse. So let's come on over here, we'll grab a meter, and we'll take a look at these fuses right here for motor 1 and motor 2. And I'm pretty confident we'll have a blown fuse on one of them. So put your meter on tone and test across the fuses. Yep, let's see what we get. Good fuse. Good fuse. Good fuse. Ooh, all good fuses. That's weird. So why isn't that motor running? That's interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and come on back over here. And what we're gonna do is we'll disconnect this motor from these points. I wonder if it broke the wire completely in there. I don't think it broke it completely. But let's go ahead and disconnect this, strip it back to here, and we'll check voltage, and then we'll see. The motor doesn't feel too bad. It's kind of tight, but we need to check voltage out here. So let's get the wire tape off. Let's get this connected, stripped back to here, cut off, and then we're gonna test voltage, and then we'll test the motor again. All right, we got it reconnected, and it's running now, but the bearings are bad in the motor. Don't know if you can hear that, but they're whining, they're bad. So we're gonna go ahead and change that motor. Go ahead and kill the power. More than likely, we've been shutting off on high pressure on everything else and didn't even know. What are the odds that we had a refrigerant leak on this one and then high pressure on those ones and we didn't even know yet? But this really comes to paying attention to where you're at. You know, we're up here the whole time and it's like, why hasn't this walk-in freezer turned on? You know, it's something you want to pay attention to. And then this one went off on pressure relief, you know, where it was bypassing. So we're gonna go ahead and get this motor swapped out. I keep these motors in my van, but what's interesting is I still don't know what caused this motor not to run, because once we powered it up and heard it, you could hear bearings going bad in it, but if it was a bearing that was making it not work, the motor would be overheating. So it's interesting. I still don't know what's going on here, and I kind of want to change those fuses too, just for giggles, because of that electrical short that we saw. But anyways, we're gonna get the motor swapped out and then we'll finish troubleshooting from there. All right, so someone has the universal hub put on backwards, which is kind of silly. So we're having to pull it off. If you put the universal hub on the correct way, you can just pop the blade off and don't even worry about the hub, and you'll see what I mean when we put ours in. But all right, now we're gonna get this guy off. So what you wanna do is take a crescent wrench on the top, spin the blade while holding the shaft, while pulling up on the blade. It'll ever so slightly move up higher and higher. Now, do you have the Allens completely loosened so that way it can spin freely? There you go. Just make sure they're enough to where it can spin freely. That should be enough. And then now you should be able to grab the top of that shaft with that crescent wrench and spin the blade on there, and then pull up on it as you're spinning, and you see it's moving. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Keep doing that. There you go. Probably got it enough now. Just grab the blade with two hands. No? Let me see that crescent wrench. I can get it from down here. Now when you get to the top, you might, oh, hold on, you might run into a problem. There you go. Now you got it. Okay, so we'll put this guy on the right side. We'll get the screws out, although we do have a new universal hub. But get those screws out, and then we'll mount the new motor in there too. All right, now we want to get this motor out, but because there's wires on both sides, we can't just pull the motor straight up because it's going to hit. If the motor wires were all on one side, it'd be super easy. But what we need to do is we're actually going to have to loosen up one of these ears. We loosen up one of these ears, then you can bend it and pull everything out. But you're still going to have to pull the pinch point over here. Is that where it's at?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to pull that bolt out, then pull one of these loose from those screws up top down to the bottom. Then you can pry that out of the way and pull the motor out. All right, now that you got it, you're going to need to pry those arms and twist the motor around so the wires go out the right hole. There you go, you're twisting it to the other side. Be careful dropping it down on the condenser. Now keep in mind you're gonna have wires over here too, so it's always a chore here. You can try cutting these. It's gonna be tight though. Still gotta get that little bit up. It was a little too difficult to take out, so we're gonna pull that other arm too, so that way we can pry it open a little bit more and hopefully get it out. Told you we'd win. All right, this new one, even though it's not my favorite motor in the world, all the wires are on one side, so it'll go in a lot easier. This is a Century motor. So I prefer the US motors, the Mojave ones, but it is what it is. This is what we got for today. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and mount or mark the universal hub where we want it. Is it not spinning? Oh, there you go, okay. Go ahead and drop it down. We're gonna find the perfect placement, and then we'll mark it with a marker once we get the perfect placement. So go ahead and drop it way down, way down, way down. Yeah, you're gonna wanna, okay, so go up just a hair. About right there, I think looks pretty good to me. And then down here looks pretty good. So go ahead and remove the blade. And then we'll go ahead and mount this guy. We can even mark it, and we'll make sure that we're on the flats too. So So we've got it marked, that's about the right spot, and we gotta make sure that the Allen screws are gonna go on the flat of the shaft, and they are. You don't want it to push down on this bottom part where it's not flat anymore, okay? So that's perfect right there. We're gonna go ahead and mount that, and then we'll put the blade on. So we ended up cutting the shaft because it was hitting the top of the fan guard. Okay, so take the sandpaper and run it lengthwise like you're sanding a piece of pipe. There you go, and just sand the top. We're just getting the ridge off, just on the top. There you go, just like that. Just keep doing that. Okay, that should be good. Now let's put that top on and make sure it fits now. Perfect, plenty of room. To cut the shaft, we just used a bandsaw. Super easy to get in there. Not very violent on the bearings on the motor or anything. They say that, I mean, I use angle grinders for years, but they say that the angle grinders can actually damage the bearings in the motor. I don't know if that's true or not, but I just used a Sawzall anymore. All right, we're nearing the end of the change out of the motor, so we can't turn the system on until we have the motor changed. I turned off the vacuum pump, isolated these hoses, so this is technically my DK. Again, you're never gonna obtain a perfect vacuum on a pump down system, okay? So that's why I didn't bother to go get all my big fancy hoses and stuff, because we're only pulling through the low side anyways, and I let it run for a good hour or so. This is to my satisfaction, we're fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and start cleaning up the vacuum pump and everything, and we're just getting ready to turn this guy on. We know we're gonna have to add gas, so went ahead and hooked up the 404A. Remember, we weighed it downstairs, purged it up to here. Everything's closed. Evacuation's slowly rising, but that's fine. This guy's all finished up. We're just gonna put the covers on and everything, and get ready to turn the fan motors on, then turn this system on. All right, got the fuses changed out. We're gonna turn this guy on. It's running in the right direction. Both of them are running. We're allowed to run 4.7 amps. Let's see what we're at. 3.6, 3.5, so we're fine on our current. Let's check the other motor too. Should be approximately the same. Yeah, 3.9, we're allowed to run 4.7. So those guys are good. Condenser fan motors are good. Now we can continue on with our repairs. All right, power's on, so we're gonna go ahead and open up the king valve, let the refrigerant flow through, and then we'll go over to the other side and start adding refrigerant, which I'm sure we're still gonna be low because we haven't added any, right? So this guy can get opened all the way. We'll make sure we fix that packing, and we'll tighten on these caps really tight. I don't know if I showed it too, but when I pulled this guy out, there was oil in it. You see all the little drops. So we'll make sure we get that on really tight. And currently right here, and we're flashing like crazy. So we need to go ahead and start by clearing the sight glass, and then we're gonna add the extra refrigerant we need for our flooded charge too. All right, I've added some refrigerant, and the sight glass is kind of going from clear to flashing. Now, if we did not have any extra low ambient components in this system, a clear sight glass would be all that we need. But because we have a head pressure control valve, once we get that sight glass clear, we're gonna have to add extra refrigerant, so that way when it's really cold outside and it tries to flood the condenser, we have the extra refrigerant needed to do so. I've got lots of videos explaining the head pressure control valves, but essentially, it's a valve inside here. It diverts the gas from the discharge directly into the receiver in low ambient conditions to help to maintain a pressure differential across the expansion valve, because when it gets really cold outside, the head pressure drops. And at certain times, it can drop low enough that it won't feed the refrigerant through the expansion valve properly, and it'll cause issues. And because the head pressure control valve dumps vapor into the receiver, if the receiver doesn't have a liquid seal in it or a liquid level at the bottom just waiting for that vapor to push on the liquid, then it's going to feed vapor down to the expansion valve, and you never want that. So when the head pressure control valve bypasses and dumps vapor into the receiver, you want it to be pushing down on the liquid that's in the bottom of the receiver, pushing the liquid to the expansion valve and not letting the vapor get to the expansion valve. All right, we're pumping down right now, and it actually just shut off at about 15 PSI, and it's slowly gonna rise and then turn back on a few times while it gets all the vapor out of the oil of the refrigerant. But a way to speed this process up is it's shut off at the moment, is simply just very carefully push up on the bellows of the pressure control.
I made it run, and it's gonna pull down. We'll let it pull down to about 5 PSI, and then we'll shut it off. We just kind of speed up the process here. That's about good. All right, now notice that it will rise back up because the internal pressure relief in the compressor is not gonna let it pump too low. But notice we're not going up too much more. We're staying around 10 PSI. At this point, we've got the receiver king valve front seated. We need to check the liquid level because we ran a clear sight glass and then I added a couple extra pounds, and we're gonna check to see if we're at the 3/4 mark. If we're not, we're gonna keep adding gas. And I put a mark on it the last time I fixed this system. All right, so we've added gas, and you can clearly see that our liquid level is way below my mark. So this is the 3/4 mark right here, and we're way down here. So we still need to add refrigerant. We're only at about half the receiver. We still need to add a lot of gas to get it to the 3/4 mark. Now we are gonna cheat right now. We gotta be careful about this, but what we're gonna do is actually turn the system on and add gas to the low side while it's bypassed at the pressure control. Now we gotta be careful about doing this because I didn't wanna open the system up and let it turn back on and wait for it to pump down again. But you gotta be careful about this because we don't want it to overheat the compressor. All right, we are just about there. Just a little bit more to go and we'll be right at the 3/4 mark. All right, easy peasy, there we go. We are now at the 3/4 mark. You can clearly see where the liquid level is at. So we know we have the maximum amount of refrigerant in there, and I think it's really handy to mark that for the next guy. That way he knows you left it there. All right, system is running. We tightened all the packing glands on every valve. We torqued the tops back on, torqued the 1/4 inch ones on, so everything's good. This guy's running its little heart away. In fact, everything else is running. So we're probably gonna go downstairs, take a lunch, let the box come down to temp, and wrap this one up. I think we'll probably get out of here and then take a lunch after that. But everything is well, and we're just gonna talk to the customer. They're not gonna, I know they don't wanna change those coils right now. They're really not into spending any extra money than just repairs right now. So we'll just tell them, this is like the second time we've had to fix leaks on the coils. So, eventually they're gonna need to be replaced, but for now, I think we're good to go. It's gonna be a while, but it's 44 in the box right now, and it's coming down. But like I told them, it'll be a couple hours because everything in here is nice and warm. And at the same time, that bad condenser fan motor, that was affecting their walk-in freezer and their beer walk-in. They didn't even know that. We found that while we were here. So took care of it on this one, but it's getting cold, so. Even if these service calls seem repetitive, like you're fixing the same stuff over and over again, there's always a little something about them. You have to keep your eyes open, There's always new surprises. In this situation, it was just a refrigerant leak, right? And we found multiple leaks, we repaired them, but then at the same time, we're sitting here thinking, and even my apprentice was like, hey, I haven't seen that compressor run the whole time we're working on this. And I said, you know what? You're right. So, hey, kudos on my apprentice. Good job, bud. He's noticing things, and that's what's really important. When you get the apprentice to start noticing things like that, that's so important because he's looking at the big picture. He's thinking about the job and he's being observant. He's not just zoning in on what he's doing. So we found that, obviously there was more going on there. So it's so important to keep headphones off your head, to pay attention to your surroundings, to listen to the noises, and don't just zone out on your repair because you can miss other things. In this situation, the customer would have ended up calling me, and I would have ended up, or I probably would have seen it as we started the system up, to be honest with you. As I was looking at the refrigerant pressures, I'd have been like, why is the head pressure so high? And I probably would have seen it, but still, it's so good to just listen to what you're doing and pay attention to your surroundings. I'm a big advocate for saying do not wear headphones when you're on the roof or when you're working unless you're using them for ear protection. If you're working in a motor room or a big giant equipment room and there's lots of noises, of course you want to wear proper ear protection so that way you don't go deaf in 2 years, But just on a roof, don't wear headphones. Don't blast a radio. Just pay attention to what you're doing, That way you can really focus and find issues like this, all right? So we went ahead and repaired the refrigerant leaks. I notified the customer. I let them know that, hey, this unit's living on borrowed time, but they're not going to replace the coils right now. And in all honesty, I don't think, we're going to have more leaks in the future, but I think I jumped on top of it. And that's important too, when you're getting in there, just start thinking about it, being like,
where else is it potentially going to leak in the future? Let's go ahead and solve that now. Just sand it up and lay a braze on there. You know, it's not that big of a deal. Just braze up what you can. I want to kind of address a few things, and I want to talk about, number one, I know we're going to get a million comments about that. That is not my meter. That's my apprentice's meter. He likes the UEI meter. I personally don't care for that meter, but it's working and it does what it needs to do, okay? If it ever became a problem, I'd tell him to get another one, but it's fine, you know? So let's just address that one because I know I'm going to get a million comments about the meter. Next thing is marking that liquid level on the receiver. There's so much importance to that. Now, I know there's going to be people out there, especially some of the supermarket guys, that are going to say there's no need, you know, don't do that, da-da-da-da-da. You can use Sporland's 90-30-1 method, you know, all this different stuff. And of course, when we're calculating the flooded charge for a system, I'm always going to tell you to lean on the manufacturer, lean on Sporland using the 90-30-1 method, but at the same time, that won't always work. Okay, and I will say this, I've said it before in videos. If I walk up to a system that I know has a leak, but the system is not flashing at the sight glass yet, the charge verification using Sporland's 90-30-1 method is not going to help you in that situation. Because if it's not to the point where it's flashing at the sight glass yet, but you know there's a leak, you don't know how much refrigerant has left the system. So that's where marking the receiver is really going to benefit you. Now, of course, in this situation, I encourage everybody to find out the proper flooded charge for your system, either talking to the manufacturer or calculating it using Sporland's 90-30-1 method. And then once you've charged the system with the right amount of refrigerant, mark the receiver. Okay, so then from that point forward, you don't need to do those calculations. You can just simply fill it up to your mark. So that's what I did in this situation. The last repair I did on this system, I calculated the flooded charge. I reached out to the manufacturer, found how much it needed, filled it up, and marked the liquid level. So now we don't need to bother ourselves too much with trying to calculate how much refrigerant the system takes. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is, when we are working on those systems, you know, I talked about the evacuation, pulling the evacuation through my manifold gauge assembly. Of course, I always want to encourage people not to do that, but there's certain situations where it's really not practical to hook up all the big, giant, fancy stuff on the system, okay? This was one of those. I didn't see the need to do the big evacuation hoses and all that because it is a pump down system. And like I mentioned in the video, if you keep trying to vacuum down on a pump down system, eventually you're going to achieve that vacuum, but you're probably not going to have any refrigerant left in the system because you will pull the refrigerant out of there. It will take a long time, but you will, okay? The other thing I wanted to address too, because I know I'm going to get comments about it, is I was not brazing with nitrogen. It is very difficult to braze with nitrogen when you have a pumped down system. Now, in a perfect world, if I installed Schrader ports in different places on the system, then yes, I could achieve it. But the way that my system was set up for today, there was no way for me to purge with nitrogen safely and braze at the same time. It just wasn't going to happen, okay? Because I only had one suction port on the roof, and then you had two superheat ports downstairs at the evaporator. And if I would have taken the Schraders out of those superheat ports, then I would have been pushing all that, you know, the gases and the smoke and all that stuff through into the walk-in box, and it would have just been hard to breathe in there. And then vice versa, it would have been difficult to bring a nitrogen tank into the box and push the nitrogen up to the roof, okay? So it's not always practical that you're going to get to put your nitrogen rig on there. Of course, I try to do it as much as possible, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, okay? And this was one of those situations. Not really too much more that was special about this job. It was just a standard refrigeration job. You know, I had a day planned out for me. I went to this location. I actually was planning on doing something else this morning. I was scheduled to be at a location at like 7 in the morning, but this call came in earlier and I had to change my plans. That kind of stuff happens for me. We have to prioritize calls, and I always prioritize walk-in coolers, walk-in freezers over reach-in coolers and air conditioning calls, okay? So in this situation, I was supposed to be scheduled to work on someone's air conditioner, and then this walk-in cooler call came in, so I had to cancel the other call. jump onto this. And this took me a lot longer than I planned on it. I was there for about 5 hours in all the repairs and picking up parts and everything that we did. You know, I mean, you just got to deal with that kind of stuff. Sometimes plans don't always go the way you plan them. You know, things have to change. My customers do appreciate the fact that I prioritize my calls. So the one that I had to cancel on, they understand, because I would do the same thing for them if they had a walk-in cooler down and I was supposed to work on someone else's air conditioner. Now, with that being said, I'm typically not going to stop what I'm doing. If I was already head first into an air conditioning call, I'm typically not going to stop what I'm doing unless it was just dire circumstances. I'll go ahead and finish up the call that I'm on and then move on to the walk-in cooler or walk-in freezer, you know? Yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I hope that you guys get something from these videos, you know? I try to share the little bit of knowledge that I have, and I hope that it helps you guys out. I do appreciate all your feedback and your guys' support. I do have to acknowledge that we have way too many to mention on the end of this outro notes right here, several Patreon supporters and several YouTube channel membership supporters, even people that donate via PayPal and stuff. You guys, thank you everybody for the support. I've said this so many times. I appreciate all the support. I'm going to continue to make these videos whether or not you guys support me via Patreon or whatever. Okay, I'm just going to keep doing it. It is awesome to get that support. At the same time, the easiest way to support this channel, the simplest way, is simply just watch the videos from beginning to end without skipping through anything. That's the easiest way, guys. And then, of course, if you want to go above and beyond like others have, you can certainly donate via Patreon or YouTube channel memberships or PayPal. There's links in the show notes of this video for all those different methods. There's another way, a couple other ways you guys can support the channel if so interested, is you can go to my website, hvacrvideos.com. We have hats and shirts, beanies, sweatshirts, all that stuff available on there. As we're coming into the fall, the beanies, they just say HVACR. You know, we have a cuffed and a non-cuffed. And I should say this too. With the hats and the beanies, I purposely kept, HVACR videos off of them because I want, as a business owner, I don't really want my employees wearing advertisements for other people, right? So I figured the acronym HVACR with my color scheme is enough of an advertisement, but it's also not really recognizable by the general public. You know what I'm saying? So you guys I was hoping in the design that people would still be able to wear these hats, at their normal workplace. So that's why I went with that kind of a design. Now, my t-shirts, of course, they say HVACR videos. My sweatshirts, all that stuff, they're branded with HVACR videos. But the hats and the beanies just simply went with the simple acronym. As far as the hats go, forgive the crazy hair going on right here. They're a black underbill, and it's hard to show on camera, but these are see-through. It's not a trucker hat, but it is a flex fit in the back. But I can see light through this hat. It's very breathable, and it's purposely meant that way because they last me a long time. And I loved these hats. I used the hats for a year before I even released them for sale because I wanted to make sure it was high quality. And I was really, really, very important to get the black underbill on these hats because I wear my hat at work, and you grab your hat to adjust it or something, and then the underbill turns black because your fingers are all dark, so I really like the black underbill. So if you guys are interested, check out the website hvacrvideos.com. At the exact moment, I am out of small medium hats. I only have large, extra large, but I did just get confirmation that they're shipping my new order of small medium hats. I just ordered them, so they should be here in about a week or two. I will announce it on the channel when that happens. Yeah, that is it. I want to ask you guys one favor, okay? Really big favor. There is so much craziness going on right now. The world is in utter chaos. People are just nuts, okay? I don't know about you guys, but I drive on the road every single day. People drive like idiots. They're cutting people off. Nobody uses turn signals anymore. People speed. It's just nuts, okay? This world can seriously use some kindness right now. Just a simple act of kindness by any one of you guys. You can change things, okay? You can change someone's day for the better by simply buying them some coffee. Holding a door open for someone. It doesn't matter if it's a female or a male. Just be polite. Hold the door open for someone. Use common manners, guys. It's so simple to change someone's day for the better just by doing some simple act of kindness. Doesn't have to be anything extravagant. We need more kindness in the world. Please, guys, if you can do a favor for me, just help someone out. Just be nice to someone, you know, give someone some guidance, do something. Okay. We need more kindness. And I feel like if we all just did something, it would make a difference. Okay. Be kind to one another. I really appreciate you guys, and we will catch you on the next one. Okay.